No sign of Michael yet. Give it a couple more minutes.
Are you still waiting on someone?
Yeah, is that Stone?
Yes.
We're still waiting on Michael. You don't happen to see him in the waiting room, do you?
I do not.
Okay. If 7 o'clock, I'll give it a... Good evening and welcome to the Monday, August 8th, 2022 meeting of the Town of Barnstable Planning Board. The Planning Board's public hearing will be held at 7 p.m. by remote participation methods. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting will be televised via Channel 18 and may be viewed via the Channel 18 website at streaming85.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site. Real-time access to the Planning Board meeting is available utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID provided below. Public comment can be addressed to the Planning Board by utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID provided below. Town of Barnstable-us.zoom.us/J/832013838777. The phone number to dial in 888-475-4499. And again, the meeting ID 832-0138-3877. Applicants, the representatives, and individuals required or entitled to appear before the Planning Board may appear remotely and may participate through the link or telephone number provided above. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting so that they may be displayed for remote public access viewing. Application materials may be accessed by contacting Karen Herond at karen.herond@town.barnstable.ma.us or by calling 508-862-4064. At this time, I'd like to introduce our volunteer board members as well as town staff. And we'll start with Bob.
Good evening, Bob Twist.
Thank you, Bob. And Michael, has Michael joined yet? I don't see him yet. I hope he comes on soon. And Steve?
Good evening, Stephen Costello.
And Ray?
Evening, Ray Sexton.
And Tim?
Good evening, Tim O'Neill.
And my name is Steve Robichaud. Welcome. Notice of recording. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20. Chair must inquire now whether anyone else is taping this meeting, and if so, please make your presence known. Seeing none, the next phase of the meeting is public comment. This is public comment not related to any of the agenda items on tonight's agenda. Stone, do we have any members of the public for general public comment?
Yes, you do. This is Laura Cronin. I have general public comment.
Thank you, Laura. Take it away.
First of all, thank you for inviting me in. But my first public comment here is just in general. I'd like to know, why is the planning board still doing this remote participation through Zoom? It's not very convenient for people to access and get all the materials needed to do this. And these items that you've got before you, regulatory agreements and such, are really, really important. And the in-person participation is much more effective and it's much more fair to the public who would really like to be able to see the presentation in person, and also to be able to provide that feedback. It's totally different dynamic when you're having this in a public forum. And I think we requested this earlier on in the year when it was coming before, when other things were coming before you, and hoping that this would be done in the live version and not Zoom. So if there's a reason why are we still doing it this way, and I just want you to know, as a taxpayer, as a person, as a public, it is not very convenient, and it's a little difficult to manage, maneuver, and also follow along with between the TV and the Zoom links. It's just, personally, it's not very effective, and you've got some critical items going on. And I'd make one last request that this particular regulatory agreement for Shoestrings properties be waited until it could be in the public in-person forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, very much. Appreciate those comments. The governor's office has extended the availability of remote participation methods for these meetings. It's always a difficult decision of what's best to do. Ultimately, it was left up to the chair. So ultimately, it was my decision. I did, kind of go along with what a lot of other chairs did in the town for committees. And, I will say that we actually have found a little bit more public engagement due to the fact that people don't physically have to get to town hall. But your comments are well received and something that we'll definitely take into consideration going forward. We are going to continue with the agenda as planned, but definitely appreciate those comments. Stone, do we have anybody else here for additional general public comment? Seeing none, we will continue along. Before we get to the first agenda item this evening, which is an A&R, I just wanted to touch on some items from the previous meeting related to housing. We had a great presentation on housing. I wanted to thank Ray for coordinating that. And Jim, I just wanted to turn it over to you for a minute. One of the great ideas that came out of that meeting was potentially advancing a dashboard to keep the town and this board and the public advised on progress related to housing and specifically affordable housing. And just wanted to hear from you, a quick 2-minute summary. How was that received at Town Hall? And do you think that's something that might come to fruition?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Comfort, Senior Planner, Planning and Development. I completely agree. Our last meeting, the presentation by Ryan Bennett, our housing coordinator, was, I think, really well done and provided us with some great insight as to the planning efforts taking place for housing in Barnstable. And in terms of the data dashboard, we actually have begun initiation with our housing production planning, and that is through focus groups that our consultant has started and developed, as well as strategic interviews. And we will be progressing with those, with that process over the next several months, with the understanding that that plan will produce the data in a form in which we could potentially put that into some sort of dashboard or convenient method in which we could understand not only the planning board, housing committee, but the general public can understand kind of what our strengths are and what our opportunities are in town for housing and obviously our housing needs. So it was definitely well received in terms of the feedback given by the planning board. And I think Ryan and the team here have taken that information, run with it, along with our consultant for the housing production plan. And that's just begun. So for those in the public, be on the lookout. There certainly will be opportunities for public engagement regarding that.
Fantastic, Jim. Thank you. I appreciate that. This board I know every member of this board is committed to continuing to, talk about this topic and keep it top of mind. And thank you, Ray, again, for, pushing this to the front of the agenda. So we'll keep it going. Why don't we move to the first item on tonight's agenda? Bob, if you don't mind, take it away.
Thank you. This is an approval not required application. Miriam and Brian O'Neill and Dunbar Point LLC have submitted a request for an approval not required plan entitled Plan of Land at 689 and 697 Scudder Ave, Barnstable, Hyannisport, Massachusetts, dated March 24th, 2021, being a redivision of lots A and B as shown on LCC 14153B as in Bravo. Petitioners J. Brian O'Neill and Miriam O'Neill. This is not a public hearing. It does not need to be voted to open.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. And do we have the applicant here this evening to present?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Paul Revere on behalf of the O'Neills and Dunbar Point LLC. This is a very simple A&R plan. It essentially involves lot 697, although there's the adjacent lot 689. We have an 1860 main house and a 1920 cottage owned by Dunbar Point LLC. The essence of the plan is that it actually moves the cottage from the 697 property to the 689 property. We have worked on zoning relief and reached a final conclusion with the town on zoning in this matter, approving that. So it's fairly simple. It predates the subdivision law, and it has more than the 20 feet of frontage. And the frontage is on Scudder Avenue, which is a town way. And as your staff has pointed out, this is fairly straightforward. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Attorney Revere. And this time we could just work through the board, see if there's any questions, comments, concerns. Bob, anything?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And Michael?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And Steve?
No, I'm all set. Thank you, Steve.
All right. And Ray?
Just one quick question, Mr. Chair. Does moving the cottage create a vacant lot?
May I answer that, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
No, actually, the essence of this is essentially the cottage was an accessory use to 697 Scudder, and it's going to become an accessory use to 689 Scudder. There's no new developable lot. There's no nothing. It just is, it's keeping the status quo of essentially 3 habitable dwellings, but it's just changing the lot that one of them is going to be located on. And the zoning board has conditioned this in a settlement that we have with them such that it's going to be subsidiary to the 689 Scudder Avenue property, just as it is subsidiary right now to the 697 Scudder Avenue property. So it really isn't changing anything other than which lot it's attached to.
Thank you, Mr. Revere.
Great. Thank you, Ray. And Tim, any comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And I'm all set as well. Would look for a motion on this item.
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chair. I move to endorse the plan entitled Plan of Land at 689 and 697 Scudder Ave, Barnstable, Hyannisport, Massachusetts, prepared by Cape Serve, dated March 24th, 2021, which has been submitted to the board for endorsement as an approval not required plan, specifically adopting and incorporating the 3 findings of fact set forth on page 2 of the staff report dated August 4th, 2022.
Thank you, Bob. And do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Steve. And all those in favor? Bob?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And the matter passes. Thank you very much, Attorney Revere.
Thank you.
All right, and our next item on the agenda is a regulatory agreement. And Ray, if you could take it away.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is a regulatory agreement Shoestring Properties LLC seeks to enter into a regulatory agreement with the town of Barnstable to construct 34 condominium units in 2 buildings with associated improvements at 110 School Street and 115 School Street, Hyannis. The applicant seeks waivers from dimensional bulk requirements, including building height and stories, setbacks, and lot coverage standards, as well as waivers associated with density, parking design standards and dimensions, lighting and landscape improvement. We need a motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. And before we do that, this is a significant, larger item on tonight's agenda, and I just wanted to kind of offer a roadmap to the public and the members here about, kind of how we'll proceed with this. It's an impactful proposal to our waterfront district. It's going to require careful review. So first, we're going to go to the applicant for a presentation on the item. Next, we'll go to the board for some brief initial comments and questions. And then we'll hear from the public. And we want to give everyone a chance to speak. I know there's plenty of people here tonight to speak on the item. Before we do that, Jim, do you mind just kind of giving just a quick 2-minute overview of what is a regulatory agreement and what our role is?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to do that. But if I may ask for the board to make a motion to open the hearing, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely, will do. Do we have a motion?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Stephen, a second. Thank you, Ray. And all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Public hearing is open. All right, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yes, a regulatory agreement is a rather unique tool that is available to the town of Barnstable. It is adopted under the Home Rule Charter and the Cape Cod Commissions Act, and specifically can be found under Section 168 of the town of Barnstable's general ordinances. It is defined by a district that is more or less the downtown Hyannis area, with a few exceptions. And the essential intent of the regulatory district is to incentivize growth in a certain district while preserving or reducing growth in other areas of town. Before you tonight is a location that is within the regulatory agreement district, and the process for achieving a regulatory agreement within that district is exactly what it sounds like, an agreement between an applicant and the town of Barnstable. The agreement may consider waivers from the general and zoning ordinances of the town of Barnstable, and that is through a review by the planning board. And this planning board, which ultimately will render a decision through a recommendation to the town council. So once this planning board has reviewed the proposed agreement thoroughly, they will offer a recommendation whether to recommend or not to recommend to town council. And if recommended, town council will then review, hold a public hearing such as this, and determine whether or not to recommend to the town manager for execution. So it's very much like a development plan or a site plan that the town may review, but it provides an opportunity to the public and as the board, as the permit granting authority, to review this agreement prior to getting to town council. And I will offer, Director Jenkins, I don't know if you would like to offer any additional input there.
Not at this time, Mr. Kupfer. Thank you for the overview.
Great, thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Turn it over to the applicant for a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is John Kenny. I'm an attorney at the law office in Centerville. Appearing with me tonight is Stuart Bornstein, the manager of Shoestring Properties LLC, the applicant. I don't know if Aaron Bornstein, his son and business partner, has joined us or not. And then also from my office is Attorney Pat Nickerson. And then our professional engineer from Down Cape Engineering, Dan Ojala. I believe our architect, Mike Nee, he's a registered architect from Ginap Architects LLC. And then Marty Riley from M. Riley Associates is planning on joining us. Marty has a meeting in Sandwich, and he wasn't sure if he'd be able to attend this meeting or not. For our order of presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and background and benefits of the project. Then I'll turn it over to Dan Ozier to talk about the site plan. We'll have Mike Nee, the architect, talk a little bit about the architectural features of the property. And then Marty Riley, if you can join us, he submitted a petition and he wants to talk a little bit about feedback on the property. And then finally, I'll take it back and go over the requested relief with the board. So if you're all in agreement with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll proceed with the history and background and benefits.
Thank you, Attorney Kenny. That sounds great. Please proceed.
Thank you. My client acquired this property in 1996. At the time, 110. And can we, I don't know, Jim, if you want to control the screen and bring up photos, or Dan Ojala can do it. I wanted to bring up the old photo of the site back when they had the hotel and the Lewis Bay Motel and restaurant.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like for Mr. Ojala perhaps to have privilege to share screen, maybe we could ask Stone.
That'd be great. Mr. Ojala, if you could share, and Stone, could you allow Mr. Ojala to share a screen? I don't know if Stone is on.
I'd be happy to. I think I've got that queued up. As soon as the permission is granted, I'll, if I have to log back in, I can certainly do that. Right now, it still says disabled.
Okay. You know what? Let me give it a try. Jim, is it disabled on yours?
I think I can. Hold on one moment. I can pull it up for the time being, but I think it would be better if Mr. Ojala could at some point. But one moment.
Okay.
It was called Dockside Old Aerial, a PDF. I think I did email that over separately.
Great. Thank you, Jim. So as I began saying, our client acquired this property back in 1996. Prior to his acquisition, there had been a hotel on one site. You can see it there on the left, and Lewis Bay Motel, restaurant and marina on the right, and down at the very bottom of that lot was the Dockside restaurant. The hotel and motel were removed, and the Dockside was moved up to the top. So that's why we now have the vacant lot on the left and the Dockside restaurant at the top. In 1997, shortly after acquiring the property, our client proposed a condo project there. The Cape Cod Times issued a editorial supporting the proposed condo project, and they said that it would be a step towards the genuine revitalization of the entire Harbor District. Zoning at that time allowed 2 floors. My client needed 3 floors to make the project work. Unfortunately, the Zoning Board of Appeals turned that proposed project down. So the property sat there for quite a while. And then in 2015, my client began working on another project, or another proposal for this site. Between 2015 and 2017, the design was completed. It was a modern architectural style. It's trying to make a little bit of a bold statement on the harbor front. And unfortunately, that was not too well received. It was approved by the Conservation Commission. It was approved by the Planning Board. And then it went to the Town Council. The Town Council kicked it back to the Planning Board. And eventually my client withdrew the modern architectural style project. So here we are 25 years later, with the site still vacant with the restaurant sitting up top. And Dan, can you bring up the architectural renderings of the proposed building?
Just check it back in with Stone. Stone, are you on?
So I still can't screen share right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim.
Can you go to the architectural renderings, kind of the close-ups that show the building? There we go. So, as I stated, 25 years later, here we are with a brand new design. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful building. There are 34 high-end condominium units being proposed in the east end of Hyannis. It is a real investment in the east end of Hyannis, as stated by the Cape Cod Times editorial board from 25 years ago. Hopefully, it will be a step towards a genuine revitalization of the entire harbor area. At 110 School Street, the building there would have 18 units, 5 2-bedrooms and 13 3-bedrooms. 115 School Street would have 16 units, 7 2-bedrooms and 9 3-bedrooms. Are the buildings tall? Yes. Is it dense? Yes. But the parcels of land are small. We have water views of Hyannis Harbor. In order to be able to design and build and pay for a building like this, we need the height, because we need those ocean view units to help raise money to pay for it. And we need the density, we need the number of units to help pay for this. The infrastructure for this site, it's going to have underground garages with doors that open and close. So when you pull in, you open the garage, pull down into your parking spot and close it behind you. Multiple cameras for security throughout. High-end units loaded with amenities. And the cost to build this is the same as if you were building it any place else, but Hyannis doesn't support a purchase price like you could get, say, in Osterville or Chatham or P-Town. So we need the height, we need the density to be able to pay for a building with these architectural features. And the height's not unprecedented. Jim, we have a chart that shows heights along the harbor. Height diagram. Next, there you go. There should be a photo. I'm sorry, not that one, but a photo with we have a, yeah. Mike?
John, do you want the one with all the markups on it?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, as I stated, the height of the proposed condos, you can see in the middle there, dockside ridge height, 71, elevation 99.3. And I'll start over on the right, and if you look at the Cape Cod Hospital building, the brick accent band is at a height of 99.8 feet, elevation of 120. The mechanical box is 127.4, whereas our height is, ridge height is 71 and elevation is 99.3. So The Cape Cod Hospital, the existing tower is taller, and the new tower is proposed to be 4 floors, but with the mechanicals on top of it, it'll actually be 85 feet, so it'll be a little bit taller than our building. The ridge height to Lewis Bay Court condominium is 47.3 with an elevation of 93.3. Our elevation is 99.3. The communications tower, the elevation is 137.5 next to Town Hall. And the Town Hall, the ridge height is 72.4 as compared to the dockside condos, which is 71. Elevation is 99.2 and our elevation is 99.3. So it's basically, the condominium buildings are basically the same height and elevation as the existing Town Hall. So although it sounds like it's really tall, it's not unprecedented along the harbor as you pull into the harbor. And if we can go to that photo from the harbor, Jim, showing the superimposed picture of the condominium units on the water, the view from Lewis Bay. There should be another one that's a little closer up. If you look at that, you can see the condominium project in the middle there. To the right is the greenery. Further to right of that, you see a large building that runs along the waterfront, which is part of Hyannis Marina. Behind that is the current tower at the hospital, and to the left of that is where the second tower will go, behind that large Hyannis Marina building. Community benefits from this project are many. The above ground utilities will be put underground, improving the view, looking from South Street towards the harbor. The existing sidewalks along South Street and School Street, which do not comply with Americans with Disabilities Act requirements, will be removed and replaced with compliant sidewalks. The sidewalks will comply with Town of Barnstable requirements. The sidewalks along each side of School Street will be constructed, connecting them to sidewalks on South Street. Upon completion, the town will be granted an easement allowing public use of the sidewalks. Currently, I don't know how many of you walk down that road, but the road's in deplorable condition. There are no sidewalks. People coming in and out of the Steamship Authority terminal have to struggle along with suitcases and whatever else they may be carrying. And it's kind of a very bad way to say welcome to Hyannis, or and it leaves a bad impression leaving Hyannis. So this access will be much improved. A new water main will be provided, which will improve the infrastructure of the Hyannis Water Company and improve the water pressure and volume at the hydrant located near the town landing. School Street from South Street to the end of Public Way near Hyannis Harbor will be paved over, the new top coating of asphalt. Crosswalks will be provided at the northerly end of School Street where it intersects with South Street, at the southerly end of our property near the Steamship Authority and between the condominium buildings. Vastly improved landscaping along South Street and School Street, beautifying the area. Lighting on the condominium property maintained by the Condominium Association will provide street lighting along School Street. Currently, there is no street lighting along this portion of School Street. And as I stated, when you come in there in a boat at the end of the night and it's dark, you're taking your ankles in your hands when you walk up that street. An increase, obviously, in property tax revenue. Additionally, it'll put people with disposable income in downtown Hyannis to shop at the restaurants and the stores. New street drains will be installed in School Street, and a drainage easement running in favor of the town will be provided. Electric car plug-in stations will be provided. All plumbing fixtures in the units will be low water use fixtures, and other water conservation measures will be encouraged in the design. The one vacant lot in the underutilized lot on Hyannis Street will be put to use for the benefit of the community. And there'll be an increase in the number of housing units, which can counted towards the town's goal of having 10% of its housing stock affordable housing. The affordable housing site units for this property are proposed to be off-site at 310 Barnstable Road. That property will require a regulatory agreement And I have a draft of that on my desk along with an application to submit to staff later on this week to start the process on that. This project has been before site plan review in Barnstable and received approval. It has been before the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission on a formal basis and was approved. That approval was appealed to the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Appeals Committee, and the Appeals Committee upheld the Commission's approval of the project. And then it's been approved by the Town of Barnstable Conservation Commission. So with that as background, I'll turn it over to Dan Ogier. I'll ask him to walk you through the site plan. Dan?
Good evening. Thanks for restoring the permissions to share screen. You should be looking at the layout site plan there. So participants can see the screen, confirmed. Again, just for the record, Dan Ogier, I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Downcape Engineering in Yarmouthport, and helping Mr. Bornstein out with this sort of signature project for the east end of Hyannis. We're looking at, I would help them with it before early on in the late 90s. And then in 2017, some of you will remember this came through as a reg agreement, and we talked in some pretty decent detail about the site. But here with some minor revisions is, I think, a nicely updated plan. As John mentioned, we're doing a full depth rebuild on the pavement, taking all the overhead utilities where we can. There'll be some poles at the intersection, but as soon as we'll do a drop pole and run everything underground all the way down School Street to the end, so there won't be any unsightly wires. We're introducing these new ADA accessible sidewalks. There is a really rough sidewalk now where you go up and down, and it's wholly inadequate. So it will be a nice improvement all along the frontages here, and also up and down South Street for the length of our frontage. New ADA compliant, granite sidewalks, and we'll work with staff. We have them as concrete now. If DPW wants asphalt, we can certainly do that. It's a little bit less money, but we'll leave it as concrete for now. And one of the reasons for it is that concrete creates a nice contrast. There is one area where we have a sidewalk running behind a few cars, and just gives a nice graphic and visual break between the darker asphalt and the lighter sidewalk. For safety up and down School Street. School Street, as many of you may know, this end is a dead end, so it's not a lot of traffic on it. But nonetheless, we have moved the entrances as far from the intersection as possible. That's a good design characteristic. There's a street tree. We've got good vision coming in and out of these ramps. And one of the reasons that the development is able to have this density and pay for itself is that Mr. Bornstein is selected to do underground parking on these structures. So everyone will have a garage space, except for a few surface parking spaces dedicated underneath the condominium building with a pass and an overhead door to keep the cars nice and dry and safe in inclement weather. There was one question about the long-term sea level rise. And it's noted that the ground up there is a full 26 feet above sea level, and the grade of the even the basement level is well above even a 500-year event. So we're not in any manner in a danger. The basement floor will be 22 feet above sea level. So that will be it's a long-term project and will be safe for many years. The street is going to be upgraded with, as we said, once the wires come down, we can put some street trees we've shown along here. Hawk Landscape has worked with us to restore the buffer. We did get through conservation. They're waiting for this revised plan set and the updated from Hawk. Darcy's holding the order on her desk, but that's been approved. And as John mentioned, we did go through the Main Street Waterfront Historic District. This is on the very eastern end of that district. In fact, I think the next lot over is not in the district. And we pointed out that that board is charged with looking at the the massing and the height, and being that this was transitioning. There's on the very west end, there's a hotel that's fairly big, and on this end, this will be fairly big, kind of bookends to the district, gradually getting up in height as the greenery is only a few feet higher than this, and the hospital is significantly higher. So that board, who is charged with looking at those very important items, did approve, the majority did approve the plans. One of the requests of conservation was to move one of the parking spaces. So that was the late revision on this 8-2. We took one of the parking spaces that was down here and moved it up to near the school in School Street. And so there's now 5 cars that can pull in and out there. There's 2 parallel spaces on the left-hand side. And with Uber Eats and UPS and Amazon, we've left quite a few parking drop-off spaces. So there's a nice drop-off in front of the rubbish container here. There's another space that would be adequate to pull off here and another dedicated pull-off space over here. So along the edges of the street, clear of the sidewalk, there's decent amenities for people ordering food or quick drop-offs and pickups, as well as some guest spaces out on the street level. And then there's 3 more spaces down here. So the entrances to the garages, as I said, is good planning to put them further from South Street. So here they are here. You go underneath, and on this side, go underneath. And then in the building plans, it's laid out where there's a number of elevators to get up to various portions of the building. Mr. Bornstein wants to sell these as high-end units. He's trying to bring some real nice clientele into the eastern part of town. Hopefully they'll use the restaurants and amenities like the harbor, rent slips, and generally be a welcome addition to this end of town. So to that end, there's plenty of parking underneath. We exceed the code minimum requirements for the parking by a number of spaces, and also that includes guest spaces. So we feel the parking is adequate. And as you get the numbers up in a unit, there tends to be some vacancies, and it does tend to even out. Whereas if you have one dwelling unit, you don't have the flexibility of having extra spaces where some people may not be there at certain times. But in any event, it meets code, and the new code is contemplating perhaps even a little bit less parking demand. So this is the site. There is a handicap ramp that's in the front over here. It comes up to a nice open deck that'll have drains in it. All the drainage on this site is carried carefully through conveyance systems to large subsurface drainage galleys that are on the north side of the structures. We were just out there today doing a constant head piezometer test and drainage perk test and soil observations with a town witness. Part of the Conservation Commission's look at it was to do some additional soil testing. And the Steamship Authority, who is our western abutter, also wrote a letter requesting some additional information. So we're happy to provide that. I will be getting that together soon. Speaking about remotely, a week ago Monday, I was still testing positive for COVID, and I appreciate the board's ability to have some flexibility here. Being a middle-aged guy, I was surprised to be hit as hard as I was by that. And as careful as we were, 2 other family members, even though we were masked, got it as well. So it's an extremely virulent strain that's going around. But in any event, hopefully it'll taper off and it'll become not as big in the future. But I was surprised. I was hit by it pretty good, and appreciate the caution of the board. So getting through, there's grading plans. This shows the ramp that comes up on the east side. There's some steps over here. The ramp on the west property is in the middle. Again, so there will be some stairs up to a deck, and then you drive down. So the parking is about a little more than half buried. So it's not considered a story, but it does, we would represent the deck is up a little bit, so that in the pool area and so forth, there'll be a fence around it. It'll be elevated. You won't be able to simply walk off the street into the pool area or vice versa. So a little bit of a separation there. And that elevates the first floor, so you get nice views from the decks on the first floor, and then every other level up should be significant. You can see here the existing dock side. It's basically even a little bit closer to the resource areas than what we're proposing. The amount of impervious area within the 50-foot buffer actually went down with this project. So that was an attribute. But and as John mentioned, we're looking for a good bit of relief. The zoning summary is on the first table there, for density and height principally, but then setbacks a few inches here or there, pretty close to the street. But again, we're taking down all those utilities, dropping them below grade, going to create a much nicer streetscape repaving the road down past this crosswalk here, and underground utilities and patching the rest of it. They worked with engineering staff to isolate the drainage. There wasn't ever much drainage on the street. To their credit, after the last round, they did put a set of basins down in this area here, but we'll still pick up with a new set, everything from the crown down and from the crown north to South Street, and infiltrate those in special easements on our property. So that'll be separate from the local or from our on-site drainage, a separate system for that per the request of the town engineer. So that's shown on the latest plans and dashed in as drainage easements in that font right there. So I would probably leave it there. It is important, I guess, to understand the way that these garbage shed works. Mr. Bornstein is going to field tailor this, but probably at least twice a week, he's going to have a small mini truck come by and empty barrels. And there'll be a number of barrels with a locked door on each unit there. So you dump your rubbish into there. There's a secondary internal sealed unit, and it's easily accessible from the sidewalk right at grade. People just open the door, drop their bag in, and leave. And we'll tailor that to perhaps some extra pickups in the summer, but just absolutely make sure there's no issues with trash. And whether or not there's a keypad on the door, we'll decide that probably by whether or not anybody else puts trash in there or not. But that's, we think, a very good solution. It isolates it from the units, and it's kind of a double containment. The screening all around it with a vented roof, and then the internal barrels with ceiling latches as well, and the doors. So that's how that's going to work. It's a nice pedestrian scale streetscape. Again, they're relatively high buildings, but as John said, the massing, it does tend to go with the neighborhood, and especially back out from Lewis Bay, it's not going to be unusual on the skyline. So I would leave it there, but answer any questions if there are any of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Is
Great, Dan.
me?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Kenny. Thank you.
Okay. Is Mike Nee with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great. Mike, can you just talk a little bit about the architectural design, the features of the buildings?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Again, my name's Mike Nee. I'm with GNAP Architects. And it was really critical to Mr. Bornstein that this project really takes an aesthetic that's really sensitive to the neighborhood and really highly respective of that context. And it's also important that the buildings have an aesthetic that's really inspired by the coastal New England vernacular that's found on the Cape. So we really want this to be at home here and not be an imposition on the neighborhood in any way, and really feel like it's part of the fabric of the neighborhood. And to help that, even though they are large buildings, we've tried to intentionally step them down as you approach, as the building mass approaches South Street, so that they present a very residential, smaller scale face to that street. And the two buildings really create a gateway to the waterfront rather. With respect to the massing, again, we've really stepped it down towards the street, but we've taken it higher towards the water to maintain that required density for the financial viability of the project. It was again, a very conscious decision to hide all of the parking. So we don't have these large expanses of asphalt on the site. It's all hidden beneath the buildings, and just lets the architecture kind of occupy the site. Really very little expense was spared in terms of the articulation of the exterior. You can see it's a highly articulated building with a lot of detail, a lot of small scale pedestrian elements like these trellises and the walkways and railings. Really try to take the size of the building down to a much more human scale, and help to really mitigate any height that you see towards the water side. And we feel that on the water side, it really is appropriate. As others have mentioned, it's really in keeping with the size of the, thank you for that visual. Really, it does, it's really not a out of place down there where we have some very large scale buildings, particularly at the marina, the hospital looming up on the hill. Again, the tops of our buildings will really just be at the same elevation as the town hall buildings and some other larger buildings in that area. I'll pass it back over to John, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. And was Marty able to join us? Apparently not. Marty Riley from M. Riley Associates has been part of our team, and Marty has been going around talking to stakeholders around the harbor. He also has submitted a petition of support for the dockside condominium project. I'm just going to read it. We, the undersigned residents, neighbors, businesses, and visitors to Hyannis, support the proposed luxury 34-unit condominium project located at 110 and 115 School Street, overlooking Hyannis Harbor, as a beautifully designed, transformative residential development that will bring many positive benefits to Hyannis Harbor, downtown Hyannis, and the town of Barnstable in the future. The dockside condominium project is designed and shown on plans dated February 2nd, 2022, consisting of 5.5 stories with 34 luxury residential units, underground and surface parking, beautifully landscaped grounds, sidewalks, lighting, and enhanced security for residents and neighbors will increase property values and be a tremendous improvement to the surrounding neighborhood and the current year-round landscape where homeless people presently congregate at the site, which has in the past contributed to increased crime in the area. The dockside condominium project, if built as proposed and designed, will contribute to the positive transformation of Hyannis Harbor and revitalization of downtown Hyannis, benefiting local businesses, neighboring marinas, restaurants, hotels, and retail stores, creating jobs, raising the stature of Hyannis as the capital of the Cape and gateway to the islands, promoting tourism and generating an estimated $700,000 plus annually in much needed new tax revenue for the town of Barnstable. We respectfully urge all town officials, the Planning Board, Conservation Commission, and Barnstable Town Council to approve this project as designed for the benefit of the village of Hyannis and the town of Barnstable for posterity. And there are roughly 14 signatures on this, all from people down around the harbor area. And if Marty was here, he would be able to talk to you about his conversations with the people and feedback. But I will now move on, Mr. Chairman, and move over to the relief requested. This kind of goes through all the relief that was requested and the reasons why. In the town of Barnstable, hereby grants waivers or request that you grant waivers from the following zoning ordinances. Section 240-24.1.7B2 HD Harbor District special permits allows multifamily residential development totaling not more than 7 units per acre. We're asking for a waiver to allow 34 condominium units of 1.32 plus or minus acres, an overall density of 26 units per acre. The parcel at 115 School Street has a density of 28 units per acre. And the parcel at 110 School Street has a density of 24 units per acre. Under section 240.24.1.7C, dimensional, bulk, and other requirements, we're asking for relief from the minimum front yard setback of 20 feet, a waiver to allow a front yard setback for the west building of 14.8 feet from South Street on the property located at 115 School Street. Minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the east building of 19.2 feet from South Street on the proposed property located at 110 School Street. Minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the west building of 13.4 feet from School Street. And a minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the east building of 10.2 feet from the School Street. So we're asking waivers for setbacks from School Street and South Street for the buildings, front yard setbacks. Minimum side yard setback of 10 feet is waived to allow a side yard setback of 9.7 feet for the east building at 110 School Street. Minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the refuse shed of 10.5 feet from School Street. And a minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the refuse shed of 7.3 feet at 110 School Street. So we're asking for setback relief for the condominium buildings and then the refuse sheds. Minimum front yard landscape setback of 10 feet is waived for School Street. In some areas, there is none. Minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback of 0 feet from School Street for the front egress stair of the west building on the property located at 115 School Street. Minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback of 0 feet from School Street for the front egress stair of the east building on the property located at 110 School Street. In other words, the stairs come right down to the sidewalk. Minimum rear yard setback of 10 feet is waived to allow a rear yard setback of 9.1 feet for the west building at 115 School Street. Minimum rear yard setback of 10 feet is waived to allow a rear yard setback of 9.7 feet for the east building at 110 School. Maximum building height of 35 feet is waived to allow a maximum building height of 71.76 feet for the west building at 115 School Street. And a maximum building height of 35 feet is waived to allow a maximum building height of 68.81 feet for the east building and the property at 110 School Street. Maximum building height stories of 2.5 stories is waived to allow a maximum building height stories of 5 1/2 stories for the west building. Maximum building height stories of 2.5 stories is waived to allow a maximum building height stories of 5 1/2 stories on the east building. Maximum building lot coverage of 70% is waived to allow a maximum building lot coverage of 75.7% for the west building at 115. And the maximum lot coverage of 70% is waived to allow a maximum building lot coverage of 71.2% for the east building on the property located at 110 School Street. Section 240.24.111A5B requires a 10-foot front yard landscape setback from the road lot line unless otherwise specified, and we're asking for a waiver for that along School Street. Section 240.52A, design and screening standards of off-street parking, and 240.24.11A4C2, parking design standards require each off-street parking space to have minimum dimensions of 9 feet by 20, excluding the driveway to such space. We're asking for a waiver to allow all spaces to have dimensions of 9 feet by 19 feet. And actually in a zoning ordinance, there is a chart in the back, and it shows 9 by 19 as the design standard, but the actual language calls for 9 by 20. Section 240.52C, design and screening standards for off-street parking require areas for 5 or more cars be designated with enough maneuvering space so the vehicles need not back onto a public way. We're asking for a waiver to allow the vehicles to back onto School Street. As you saw, one area has 5 spaces together, so we're asking for a waiver. And I don't know how the board considers it. There are 3 other spaces. Originally, it was 4 and 4, but conservation asked us to move 1 space out of the setback area, and so it's now 5 and 3. I don't know if you look at those as 10 or 5 and 3, but we're asking for a waiver so that we can back out onto School Street from those on-street parking spots. Section 240.53B1, landscape requirements for parking lots in all office and commercial districts requires a surfaced area of a parking lot and all entrance and exit drives to be set back from the side and rear lots by a landscape buffer of 10 feet. We're asking for a waiver of that. Again, along School Street, we have those spots. Section 240.53B1, landscape requirements for parking lots in all office commercial districts requires a surfaced area of a parking lot and all entrance and drives be set back from the side and rear lots by landscape buffer. We're asking for a waiver to allow a buffer of 0 feet at 110 School Street. Section 240.53B2, landscape requirements for parking lots in all office and commercial districts require a 10-foot minimum landscape perimeter buffer be maintained between a building and a surfaced area of parking lot or drive, and we're asking for a waiver for 0 buffer on 115 School Street, and same thing on 110 School Street. Section 240.53C, landscape requirements for parking lots with 21 or more parking spaces requires at least 10% of the interior of the lot be landscaped. We're asking for a waiver to allow 0 landscaping in the underground garages on the east and west buildings. I just want to note with that one, it may sound a little ridiculous, but we're supposed to ask for all relief that could possibly be required. I don't think anybody anticipates there to be landscaping in the underground parking garages, but our ordinance doesn't really contemplate underground parking garages, so we're asking for that waiver. Section 240-104, minimum parking lot design standards requires parking lot aisles to be 20 feet wide. We're asking for a waiver to allow widths of less than 24 feet. Section 240-104, minimum parking lot design standards requires parking spaces to be 9 by 20. And again, our spaces are 9 by 19. Section 240-103E1 requires any outdoor lighting shall be directed on site only. We're asking for a waiver to illuminate so that we can illuminate sidewalks and the traveled ways because there is no lighting along School Street. Section 240-4.1.11A7 requires any outdoor lighting to be directed on site only. We're asking for a waiver again to allow illumination of sidewalk and traveled ways. Those are kind of repetitive, but they're two different sections that apply. Section 240-24.1.11A5F, street trees. One deciduous tree is required to be planted within the front setback for every 30 feet of frontage in the property. We're asking for a waiver for the parking lot fronting on School Street. And 240-24.1.11A4D, parking lot landscaping. One 3-inch caliper tree must be provided for every 5 parking spaces and must be located within 50 feet of the parking lot. Parking lots with 5 or more spaces are required to provide a 6-foot landscape buffer between property lines and the parking spaces. And relief is requested for the 5 parking spaces located on School Street. I believe that's all the zoning it's required, requested, zoning relief requested. A lot of it is duplicative because we've got the 2 buildings, and so the setback requirements and parking requirements, et cetera, we have to ask for in duplicative form because we have the east site and the west site. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to take any questions the board may have for any of us that presented tonight.
Great, thank you, Attorney Kenny. Appreciate the presentation. And we want to get to public comment. Everybody that wants to speak, but yes, before we do, let's turn it to the board for any brief comment or questions we may have at this time. And why don't we start with Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the harbor area is a huge asset for the village of Hyannis and the town of Barnstable. And we want to be careful as to how we develop that area going forward, looking not only to the near future of a year or 2 or even 5 years, but looking really to what's going to happen in the next 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. And I think we want to make sure that when we approve something for these 2 parcels of land, it's something that will essentially be an anchor, so to speak, for the development that's going to go forward in the future generations in that whole area. So the concept of having people living in the downtown Hyannis area 24 hours a day is a very good thing. To add a significant number of people living in that area is a good thing. To have architecturally desirable structures are a very good thing. The town is going to develop over the next 40 or 50 years, and that whole area in East Hyannis is going to continue to develop. And I think we want to make sure that whatever we do down on the waterfront essentially triggers the type of development we'd like to see in the rest of the east end of Hyannis, and then moving into the downtown Main Street corridor specifically in there. So at initial review of this proposal, the building looks very attractive. It accomplishes many of the things I think we'd like to accomplish. Based upon the projected photos that have been created of what the building will look like from the water and from the street, it seems to fit nicely without overwhelming the environment in the area. As pointed out, the total elevations of the buildings are not completely out of context with some of the other buildings in the area. So there's a standard that's already been set. And I think as we can expect to go forward, the development in that East End area, as old neighborhoods are renovated and reformed and new buildings go in there, we're going to see a different nature of the building in that particular area. So it looks to me as a very positive approach. I'd want to spend some more time going through the nitty gritty of all these things and looking at each of the requests that have been presented. But at first blush, it certainly appears to be an attractive proposal, at least to me. Now, one thing I do want to raise is the affordable housing issue. The plan calls for 3 units of affordable housing to be off-site. The ordinance, without a waiver, actually requires 10% to be on-site. So we're being asked to put the affordable housing off-site. I'm not troubled by that in concept. My concern is in the housing, not necessarily exactly where it is located, whether it's in this project or not in this project. I should say proposal as opposed to somewhere else. I am troubled by the numbers, however. We're being asked to grant a huge number of waivers of zoning ordinances. Each of the standards in the zoning ordinance were put in for a particular reason. And we're being asked to give waivers to a huge number of those previously considered zoning guidelines. And I'm not opposed to doing that either in concept. But I do think if at the end of the day, we being the town council may approve all of the waivers. They may approve some of the waivers, but not others, or they may approve none of the waivers. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But 3 affordable housing units on a project with 34 units is less than 10%. And I understand the rounding down issue and those types of things. But as a point of fact, if we had 3 housing units affordable out of this project, it will actually put us more out of compliance than we are now, because it reduces our compliance by 0.4 of 1 unit. What I'd like to see in return for all the waivers that are being requested, if the town grants all of these waivers, or at least a substantial number of these waivers, I'd like to see 6 affordable units off-site rather than 3. That would allow the project to go forward with all of the design factors which have been planned in and are requested, and allow us to actually make some improvement on our compliance with the 10% guideline for affordable housing. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll pass it back to you.
Great, Bob. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And Michael.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great project. I would like to, get more information and be more educated in terms of, what should I, in the future. So right now, I do not have any questions or any concern. I just want to say thank you for doing something like this, especially I live in Hyannis. I know how important it is, but there is some things that I would like to educate myself better. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. And Steve.
Thank you, Steve. I know we've been looking at these plans for a while. I think Bob made a really excellent point, because as I look at the project itself, I'm in definite favor of improving the harbor and that site in particular, in terms of the future of, I think, the abutters, because clearly in the future the smaller motel hotel that's there becomes an attractive place for someone else to maybe kind of duplicate this. And I get the sense that once this genie's out of the bottle in terms of what actually gets built here is going to really kind of set a precedence for what may follow. So I'm interested in hearing public comments, certainly, but I'm also interested in the process. I've been, maybe at this point, other than Mary, probably one of the longer standing planning board members, which I've enjoyed immensely. The part of it that I don't enjoy is the fact that we do our due diligence. We spend an enormous amount of time and volunteering our free time, essentially, to vet projects like this. And that's the way the process has been sort of described to us. So that part I understand, but I think it's important not only for folks like myself that are volunteering their time, but also for applicants to understand where they're going to go, where they're going to end up once any kind of project leaves our hands and makes its way to the town council. I feel as though in certain circumstances, they're almost starting from scratch, where that doesn't seem to be the best use of anyone's time. I'm in favor of talking about a public hearing, maybe either simultaneously or perhaps an approach that would allow us to have, an open discussion with the council, sort of almost simultaneously, that would allow us to sort of dig into the deeper heart of any issues that may come up that potentially will be sticking points for both boards, for the town council as well as the planning board. So I'm just putting that out there only because, an applicant that's presenting, a significant project with, clearly going to be massive outlay of cash, that doesn't bother me. That's their prerogative to do that in the event that, it works out as far as, as an investment standpoint. But for me personally, I think it benefits the overall process to sort of have a more cohesive, engaged approach rather than have it leave us and then end up in a spot where we've sort of come to a point where we've vetted any potential variances or requests made of us, and then you kind of start the process all over. So my only thought is, I'd like to hear the public comment, and I'd like some, just some response maybe to that, either from planning and development and maybe even some other board members. But in general, I think it's important to do something with the site. I am in that harbor fairly regularly on my own personal watercraft, so I do see the site. My only hesitation, honestly, and I understand the need for the height in order to to sort of subsidize the building essentially. It does seem, from a scale standpoint, it's quite large, and I recognize the different diagrams that have been presented and the height. I think when you view it from almost sea level or street level looking up, it does pose a slightly different kind of appearance. So I would love to be able to even potentially see, and I don't know how realistic it is, but put a couple of cranes up on the hill on the highest point and maybe run a banner so you could visually get the feeling for what that actually might look like. To me, that might be beneficial for everybody to sort of say, okay, not as bad as it looks, or maybe it is a little bit too tall. How can we think about what the design may be able to sort of accomplish? I'll reserve comments for after public comment, but thank you, Steve.
That was great. I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you. And Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to underline the comments of my colleagues. I think that Bob really captured the essence of what we're facing, and I think Steve added some insight and perspective. It is big, and as Bob pointed out, there are standards that have been established for good reason, and a lot of waivers to those standards have been requested. As Bob said, that doesn't mean that they can't be granted, but I think we're going to be very deliberate in the way that we consider this project. In particular, I am looking, and I'm not looking for an answer now, but going forward, I'm looking for an answer to, if we hew to the letter of the law, how will the affordable housing units be managed? And if in fact there is an alternative that we see fit, I do support Bob's approach. I think that 3 is not enough, and as we have discussed, and this is a very important topic, affordable housing is critical. And I personally am not in the business of giving a walkover. I think that Mr. Bornstein is a contributor to the community, and I think that Mr. Bornstein, you are sensitive to the requirements, and I think that we will find a way around the barn on this. I also want to go to Steve Costello's point, and that is, I don't want to work through this and then find out sort of not arbitrary, but a different conclusion after we've spent all this time and effort on what will be a signature project, and then have the town council surprise us, if you will. So I think perhaps some sort of body, maybe a subcommittee, needs to be formed that's comprised of members of the planning board, members of the council, members of the town housing authority, to work this out so that we don't have any surprises at the end of the day when everybody has done their due diligence and compromised and worked this through, and then somehow it doesn't come to pass. So I think there is a way to do this. I think that we need to be deliberate about it. And I hope that we can work something out with the council to work on this collaboratively in process, rather than just simply hand something over and wonder what's going to happen to it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you very much, Ray. And Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also share the same sentiment with my colleagues that this is a very interesting, unique property in an area of town that can definitely use it. And I think this is an exciting opportunity for the board to go and do its review. And as Bob had mentioned, really think about this in terms of, not just maybe this one project, but how it kind of sets the tone for projects in the future in this area in town and maybe others. Looking forward and thinking about our housing production, and also some of the issues that face new development and some issues we face with groundwater and wastewater. Density is going to be the new thing. Density solves a lot of problems, but it creates a lot of unique issues as well. Height, how does it look and feel, and how does it work in the character of the neighborhood? And to reiterate what Steve Costello said, you kind of don't want to let the genie out of the bottle unless it's, fully ready, and really kind of think about it in that regards. And the devil will be in the details to kind of go through and really kind of fully vet this and spend the time and go through all of our concerns, listen to the public comment, and think about it from every angle. I also would agree with Steve and with Ray about the process going forward, and spending all the time vetting this application, and then having it kind of go through a whole second verse, with another body. I think it's a lot on the applicant. It's also a lot on the public and all the stakeholders to have to go through 2 processes. And, sometimes the steam can kind of run out on some things. So, if the board would discuss some sort of subcommittee or something, or maybe we can talk with planning about some options there to make it a more streamlined process. I think that would be great. And that's all. I look forward to public comment. I look forward to hearing from staff in the process going forward. And I look forward to going through the details on this one.
Thank you, Tim. It's great. Appreciate that. Definitely echo a lot of the statements made by my fellow board members tonight. I think there were some great comments made. The big one for me is, I've been on the board for a few years now. This is definitely the most waivers that I've seen. It's a big ask, and this is a negotiation. So, really, if there's a big ask on the applicant's end, there's going to be a big ask on our end. And I think, if I had my way, that would be related to housing, and specifically affordable housing. So I really do agree with Bob on that one. And I know other members kind of echoed that. Also would love, to pursue a path, a process that would allow us to collaborate with other boards, and certainly look forward to talking more about that. At this time, I'd like to go to public comment. And before we do, Stone, are you on?
I am.
Is everyone that's going to be making public comment in the room right now, or is there anybody in the waiting room?
Everyone is here, and they, I don't have them in an order specifically, but I know Cheryl Powell, Laura Cronin, Felicia Penn had all identified themselves to me, but I wasn't sure if they'd already set an order themselves.
No problem. Yeah, I see about 6 or 7 on, so I'll just, I'll work through them. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't anybody else waiting. All right, thank you, Stone. Before we start with public comment, I just want to make a couple quick comments. We're going to give everybody about 5 minutes to speak. We want to have enough time where everybody can speak tonight. Please do not unmute until recognized by myself or by Stone. Prior to making public comment, please identify yourself with first and last name. Once public comment is complete, please remain muted for the duration of the meeting. Please remember, public comment is addressed to the chair and to the board, not to the applicant. The applicant should remain muted during public comment unless recognized by the chair. There will not be an opportunity for the public to engage in open dialogue with the applicant. Again, all comments are addressed to the chair and to the board. And just a reminder that our role is to offer recommendations to town council. And if this item comes before town council, there will be additional opportunity for public comment. So at this time, I'm just gonna kind of go on the board here based on who I see. David Lawler, are you here for public comment?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm here with Wayne Kirker, and I represent the Dockside Marina LLC. I'm an attorney in town. If I would, through the chair, ask Dan Ojala to bring up the site plan, if he might, if that's appropriate or not, Mr. Chairman.
Dan, if you don't mind, please go ahead.
So actually, that picture, if you leave that one, if you can click back to the tall one, the first one, I'll address that at first. The number one of the issues here we've heard you talk about is the height of this specific structure, and that's the best photograph, or picture or rendering, that I wanted to look at. In that, if you look at these structures, the front of of most properties is the street, but when it comes to waterfront, the front of the house or the front of the building is generally the water. And you have the ferries come in, and really, if you look at this structure, as quoted by Mr. Ojala, the property sits above 26 feet above sea level. So coming in from the water, which really is the signature piece of this property, not South Street. And I think everybody would, coming into Hyannis, or what you see, these really aren't visually 5-story buildings, but rather 8. If you look, because if you take from sea level, if you take these structures, it's not 71 feet, but it's more like 96, 97 feet, depending on what calculations you use. And the visual impact of this is tremendous. Now, the architect talked about massing in the back of the property, but in the front of the property, they're basically almost straight structures with these balconies. And there were also comparisons made to other buildings. For instance, the greenery, which you can see in the right-hand corner of the property, and the hospital, and they also reference town hall. Well, first of all, none of those tall buildings are directly on the water as the one proposed by Mr. Bornstein here. Moreover, the other buildings all have smaller structures in front of them, or with respect to town hall, massive trees, and that offsets the massing of these buildings, where from a site view from town hall, you can see it in the general photograph, how the massing's offset. In these structures, there's nothing in front of them except my client's property, which is a 26 feet right down to the water. And that does not allow, it provides no break from the visual, the most important view of the water. Again, you have the visitors coming in from the vineyard, from Nantucket, boaters. This is Hyannis. It's the primary port, and I would suggest all of Cape Cod, certainly on the south side of Cape Cod. And here you are asking to put in these two giant structures where generally only 2.5 stories have historically been allowed, but also massing in there 34 specific units where 14 would be allowed as a matter of right. It's it's just too much for this particular lot. Average of 26 units per acre. It's a tiny lot, and it's just trying to get too much into too small of a space. My client is not opposed to development, but the level, the scale here being sought is tremendous. Now, also, if you look at the site plan with respect to the parking, regardless of what zoning says, it's the actual use of the property. These are high-end condos, and these specific high-end condominiums have a total of 90 bedrooms with 70 parking spaces. If these are high-end, people can afford 2 vehicles. Most likely, they're going to be older people demographically, financially. Weekends on Cape Cod, who comes down? The kids and the grandkids. Where are you going to put the vehicles? Because you have 90 bedrooms. And my client is very concerned about this, because if you see in the bottom portion of the site plan, that's his property. And there already is a tremendous problem with traffic getting people backing down into his property from the present uses. Now, if you all of a sudden take 90 bedrooms and the people that go along with them, and I know Mr. Ojala indicated that they might be vacant at some point. I don't think you can make any assumptions to that effect. You must assume that these are going to be completely sold and filled. And yes, there will be times when they're not being used as much. And I can tell you what those times are: January, February, March, and April. But other than that, certainly June and July, 4th of July weekend, Labor Day, Memorial Day, this place is going to be packed. And the road is going to be, there's not going to be enough places to park. There's just absolutely insufficient parking for the uses provided, regardless of what zoning says. And also from a safety standpoint, at the bottom of this hill are the 2 fireboats and the police boat. That road is very narrow. You have 34 units. Today, I can just tell you from personal experience, the amount of times that a UPS or an Amazon truck, people now have changed their living habits. They get their dog food delivered. They get packages constantly. These are people coming down for the summertime. There's no place for any type of pickup and delivery other than those 2 spots. Think about it. You got 34 units, 90 bedrooms getting deliveries throughout the day, and there's no place to drop them off. I don't believe, based upon my read of the plans, that the underground basement can handle the height of an Amazon truck. I also look at the garbage and how to handle that. Are you going to be able to fit enough garbage in those? I initially thought a truck would be backing up in that area. It's insufficient to handle a dumpster truck. It's only 24 feet in diameter, but the first time I heard they're intending to put barrels, so they're going to have at least 34 individual barrels to be dumped twice a week. It just is not sufficient. Again, I think as a board, you must make assumptions that these are going to be used for what they're being built for. We have 3-bedroom units and we have 2-bedroom units. High end, which would indicate, disposable income, which would indicate, again, the deliveries. And then you bring in the question, okay, high end. You're going to have people coming in and cleaning the units once a week. Where do they park? Where does the pool person park? It's just way too much for such a small site. Now, if they were to scale this back from 5 stories to 3 or maybe 4 with less units, you might be able to make it work to some degree. My client is not against a development of a unit here, a condominium unit here, but the scale is so massive that it just makes absolutely no sense from a standpoint of actual pure logistics. Now, again, where do these, when 2 UPS trucks come, and where do they go? Well, they come down and they go into my client's parking lot and turn around, and he has insufficient place for them to turn around. Where does the fire truck come when those 2 or 3 UPS and FedEx and the mail truck, where do they go? There's no place to go. School Street creates a tremendous bottleneck, and it creates a danger. I don't know where this has been vetted with the police department and fire department, but if you look at the deliveries, if all of a sudden there's a boat on fire, and it takes an extra 3 or 4 minutes to clear the road to get the firefighters down there, that creates a tremendous safety hazard. These are the issues that need to be vetted on this project. On a minor note, I saw that they changed the lower parking on the hill facing the water from 4 to 3 spaces. There's no retaining wall. That's all sand. If someone parks a large truck on that, is that going to collapse into my client's property? We don't know. Just another question. But there are a lot of questions we have. Exactly what is the height of this project from sea level? That's really what you have to ask. And what are they measuring the 74 feet from? And, are they raising up the foundation or raising up the area and then bringing it up? I don't know if maybe, have the applicant get a crane and put a giant ball up top to show the height of this thing, maybe? Who knows? And, so you can get some scale from the water of how actually how big this is going to be. Because these numbers are very difficult to process in your head from where the scales are. Now, obviously, he's hired some very good professionals. I know many of them, they're excellent professionals, attorneys, engineers. But the photographs, how far back are they taken from with respect to scale? Where are you going to be when you're pulling in the ferry and you're coming up close to this property and you see this building that's 100 feet high? It's an 8-story building from a visual standpoint. Because of it's literally built on the highest point in the harbor. And the hospital's been built at an elevation of 16 feet, which is 10 less, but it's a block and a half back. The Hyannis Harbor Hotel, I believe, is at 0 elevation. So again, you have to take into consideration not just the height of the building, but the contours of the land. And that's not been discussed here. And I think it needs to be vetted in a very strong manner. I could go on and on forever. I only have 5 minutes. I know I'm not the applicant, but this needs to be vetted. And I would suggest to you that further meetings, public comment, remain open. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Attorney Lawler. I appreciate that, Mr. Crittenden. Thank you.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. Could I speak for a moment? I'll make this short.
Sure. Yes, Wayne. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, we have enough parking for our customers down at the marina, but we don't have. But nevertheless, I have to man it every day just to keep the people from the Steamship Authority trying to park there. You might say, why don't I put in a gate? If I put in a gate, then the larger fire trucks who are down there more often than you would think, they would have to back all the way up the hill. So I don't want to put in a gate and hinder the fire department because they have 2 boats down there and there's a police boat down there. And sometimes both of the crews are there all at the same time. On occasion, the state police park tie up a boat down there. When we give them a space to park just to take the pressure off the area. But to narrow that street, I mean, not physically narrowing it, but to have parking that actually gobble up some of the sidewalk in the street, to me, is ridiculous. For example, where those dumpsters are going to go, it's only like 14 feet from the shed to the street, and it's only like, I don't know, 7 feet to the edge of where the sidewalk is supposed to be. So there's no way in the world a garbage truck's going to be able to go in there without sticking its tail end well into the street, and that's going to wait till they dump 20, 40 trash barrels or whatever. They'd be tying up a big portion of that street forever. I know that the dumpsters that come into my place, those trucks are way bigger than a parking spot would be. And they got to make a turn. There's no radius there for them to make that turn, so they're going to be doing like a 3-point turn just to pull in. Or they're going to try to park in the street to pick the rubbish up from there, since getting into those tiny spots isn't really viable. So for my customers, all the police and fire, they have to put up with a narrowed street because the developer's trying to gobble up so much of this space to be sure that his profit margin is still there, is ridiculous. And as far as, you know, that one photo you have where it shows the, all the buildings way back, I just looked at that photo and I see the market that's out well in the Lewis Bay over by 3/4 of the way to Egg Island. So that photo was from a mile away. You take a photo up close and that's a whole different ballgame. So think about what it's going to be if everybody in town uses the excuse, well, we need dozens of waivers because otherwise we don't fit. I certainly would like to see development continue in Hyannis Harbor, but I think that development would set us back because the traffic pattern will be terrible, and the millions of people that get off those ferries every day, they come from Nantucket where everything is built nice and quaint and pretty, and the 4-story buildings around town, like over on Ocean Street, they're handsome, and they're set back, and there's stuff in front of them. Here you got the 5.5 stories. You got the tallest building around on top of the tallest spot in Hyannis Harbor. So you got a 100-foot building from the water where the millions of tourists come in, and that's not, believe me, that's not going to be a nice. That's not going to be what they think they should be seeing when they get into Cape Cod. That photo right there, back up one photo, please. That there's a little, no, right there, stop, please. Way over to the left, you see something out in the harbor. There's like the 3 pilings holding up a sign. This camera is back at least a mile, I would say. So from a mile away, you can make anything blend. But it doesn't blend when you really see it. This is called the outer harbor. This is Lewis Bay. From the inner harbor, in fact, I think this is from Yarmouth. It's so far away. Any case, from the inner harbor, you can't have the tallest building around on top of the highest point in the harbor, and think that's just going to it's going to be. I mean, put it this way: if you gave me the same variances at the marina, I'd build a 7.5-story building, and maybe people would be saying, "What, are you crazy? That ruins the effect of being on Cape Cod." So stop talking before I.
It's just way too much for the site. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you both. Appreciate your engagement. Thank you, Wayne and Attorney Lawler. Why don't we go ahead and stop sharing for now, and let's go to Cheryl Powell next. Cheryl?
All right, can I just ask, because I think Felicia and I have pretty much the same stuff. Felicia, are you okay with me to go ahead? Because I might cover some of the stuff that I think you will probably by the last meeting, all right? I'll assume.
Felicia, are you on?
Okay, so I'm Cheryl Powell. I'm chairman of the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission, but I am here tonight also as a member of the public. I wanted to make that clear, and I am concerned. I also think it's important to bear in mind that whatever you do tonight, you're setting a precedence, and you don't want in the end, because how many times has danger and safety and things been mentioned? and the, hi, Felicia, and you don't want people to say, well, how did that happen? I agree with what a lot of the commissioners or some of the planning board would have said. I agree that there's a good idea to have a new subcommittee. I think we have to pay attention to the abutters. We have to pay attention to the scale. Attorney Lawler and Wayne, I totally agree, and you were saying a lot of what I was saying. So you have to look at the other buildings, and I disagree. I think it's inaccurate, the picture, 99.3 and 99.8. If you have something in the foreground, let's use that. Can we put up on the screen, please, the lighthouse, if possible? Nope, we can't do that. Okay, well, then I'm hoping people can see this on your screen. Grab these two things. If we have, this is the lighthouse. And if we put this in for him, this is what's proposed. If I put it like this looks bigger when it's actually not. So we're talking about the pictures with and how they seem to be inaccurate, with respect. And Mugar is set back, as has already been said. It's not on the waterfront, so therefore that scale is not completely. So I don't support the passing of the regulatory agreement. I think some of those pictures are inaccurate. Parking's been taken care of. If we can go to pick 4, if we're still able to bring up, I don't know if we are, but if you look at the pictures, which Wayne and Attorney Lawler use, the windows go 6 up. It is argued that it's only 5.5 stories. The regulation is for 2.5 stories, not 5.5 and not 6, but there's 6 windows going up. The argument is that, it's not really, it's just 5.5, but it's still over. As we stated, regulations are there for a reason, because they're there to not get you in trouble. Public safety's been mentioned. I'd like to know what the additional mitigation is. That's been mentioned. The parking lot is actually underground, which I'm concerned about, although they say that they'll take care of it. The other things I wanted to be, yes, when it came before us, and it's on camera, so I did check with the Ethics Commission and all that stuff that I can actually mention it because it's on camera and public domain. The 6-story, one on the top with 6 windows, is described as a rec room, a quiet room, a relaxing room, a loft. But the thing is, and I believe it also has an elevator that goes up to it. So the thing is, it's still 6 up. It's still way too high. I am in favor of building and development, very much so. But I think, as I said, the regulations are there for a reason. If we start ignoring them, then everybody else thinks that they can ignore them. I think the zoning code might try to call it a 1/2 story. We've already compared it to Mugar. Let's see what I've got here. 8. Our charter did say that we would cover the height. And it did go to an appeal. And when it went to an appeal, it was asked, well, if we go ahead and allow it, then what happens? And it was said, well, then it goes to planning and it goes to the town council. So it's my opinion, it kind of got kicked down the road a little bit. I have anything else? They have admitted it's high. There was an argument that made it go to the appeal, and that is because Mr. Kirker did not receive his notification. I know we're trying to address that. It is dense, it is high, that's been admitted. I think I'm trying not to overlap, but I know what Felicia, I suspect Felicia will go into. So the bottom line is, it's 2.5 stories. I would be in favor of it if it came down, because I think it should be developed. I think that a subcommittee or something can work on that and try to bring it down. I also understand if they want to make a certain profit and whatever, and to get the building and still have a profit, they need to have 34 units or more. but I also think we have to take into account, what are we doing to the town? What precedent are we setting? And, you know, keep in mind the safety and the abutters, and place yourself, if you lived in that area, how would you feel to have this huge complex go and, you know, take up the space? I like the idea of the sidewalks being done, but and they need to be done. But I do not believe that that's a reason to grant it. Last thing, the affordable housing. I said instead of 3, instead of the amount, it goes to 6. I think even 6 is too little. Our biggest problem right now, and it was stated before, to bring the right sort of people into town. Well, yeah, but the thing is, one of our biggest problems is the housing, and we wouldn't be bringing in people who are having problems with getting housing. So I think we have to be significantly more than that. So we have to look at our standards, and I think there's the highlights. Oh, the other thing is they didn't mention the rentals. They are going to allow those units to be rented. I used to live at the Yachtsman, and it was like a revolving door with parking and problems with that. My car was hit by 2 of the renters, and they just took off. Again, we're down to the parking, but I believe they said they'd restrict it to 2 rentals annually. I think that's pretty much what I had. We need our harbor district. Lastly, our harbor district is who we are. We are Cape Cod. There is nothing, well, there are many things that are important in the area, but our harbor is kind of our postcard feature, and we want to be careful what we do with it. And that's why the standards and the guidelines are there. So I think we need to pay attention to them without, as I said, I'm not against development, but let's not abuse it. And if anyone has any questions of me, I've tried to rush through this as much as possible, but that's my opinion. It's too high, it's too dense, it's not going to take care of the parking, it's going to have parking underneath, but the summer months, what are you going to do with all the guests, Aunt Zelda and Bobby whatever or something? You know, what are you going to do with their cars? All the kids that want to come down from college. And it's the services, and that needs to be tended to. And I thank you for your time. I think I've stayed within 5 minutes. I've been struggling with it. And as I said, if you have any questions. Bottom thing is procedure. And you don't want people to come back and say, how did that happen? You know, now we have all this danger and safety stuff, and who let that happen? And don't kick it down the road. Let's see if we can deal with it somehow.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Cheryl.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you. Always appreciate your insight and feedback. Just going down the line on my screen, Valerie Moore, if you have public comment, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My name is Valerie Moore. I am a partner with the law firm of Nutter, McLennan and Fish, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the Steamship Authority. As the board is aware, the Steamship Authority is a direct abutter to the site, with the terminal property immediately adjacent to the property, as well as its Lewis Bay Road parking lot slightly to the north of the site. The Steamship Authority has been working with the developer to address some of its concerns related to the development. We wanted to raise a few of those concerns before the board this evening, but generally to just report that we do expect that we'll be able to resolve them with Mr. Bornstein. First and foremost, we are certainly concerned about the height, though not from an aesthetic perspective. The Steamship Authority relies on an antenna that's located on that Lewis Bay Road parking lot to provide communications support for its vessels out to sea. We are concerned that the height of the buildings could block the signal from that antenna and interfere with communications with the vessels. We are working with the developer cooperatively to resolve that concern, to find a technological solution that could address the potential for the height to interfere with that signal. Additionally, we did have the developers' proposed stormwater systems reviewed by our consulting engineers, and they requested some additional information from the developer. Cooperatively, they have agreed to review it and to provide responses. And so we expect to be able to report to this board at a future hearing that we have been able to address these concerns, but we did want to note them for the board this evening. And with that, that's all I wish to raise at this time. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we certainly look forward to receiving that additional information. Just moving down the line, Felicia Penn.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Perfect. Go ahead.
I assume you got my memo dated August 2nd, and hopefully you get to read that, because I think I raised every issue that was pretty much raised or discussed tonight in that. I still believe the project needs to be modified, as you have heard from others, so it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. It's too big, it's too high, it's too dense. There's not enough parking. Parking spaces are too small. There may be public safety issues with people backing out on School Street. Parking lot aisles required defined width. There aren't enough EV charging stations, and there's not enough landscaping for anything like this. Overall, to think in a global view here, the problem is that the project blocks public access to the waterfront, and it's not a good precedence to set so that people can't see the water, even though it's scaled, you know, lower in the front and higher toward the water. You can't see the water from South Street or School Street when you're there. And access to the waterfront is key for all water-related areas, of which Hyannis Harbor is. No regional harborfront allows this on the waterfront. A block across the street from the waterfront, fine. But to block the view, no, not Nantucket, not the Vineyard, not Newport, not Chatham, not Falmouth, not anyone. They just wouldn't do it, and we shouldn't either. I always ask the question, why have height and density requirements if they can all be ignored, so that not because the community is benefiting, but it's because the developer is benefiting from a profitable project. I mean, that is not a good reason to waive. You know, it's one thing to compromise on something, but 5.5 stories in a 2.5 story area. And like I said in my memo, I had actually contacted Planning and Development, not this past July, but the one before that, and said, hey, you know, how come you have heights at 2.5 in the Harbor District? Don't you think they should be 4? And they said, no, we like 2.5. Well, there's a reason for that. So that was their feedback to me. If you want me to dig out the emails and show you, I'd be happy to. But I mean, you know, it's 2.5. It's not 5.5. All right, you want to go 3? You want to go 3.5? Okay, but not 5.5 or 6, as Ms. Powell brought to our attention. I've requested in the past that the town produce a harbor plan. We don't have one. We're working on a local comprehensive plan, but we don't have a harbor plan. We've never had a harbor plan. Approving this project before you have a harbor plan is really not good policy. I hope that the town comes up with a Hyannis Harbor plan, because right now it's just whatever idea anybody has, one at a time, jigsaw puzzle pieces thrown together. There's no harbor plan, and there should be one. Regarding process, I know regulatory developments, agreements are cumbersome. And I know that it's a lot of work on your part. And I know that it takes up a lot of your time. But it's the planning board's job to renegotiate this regulatory agreement. You have a draft in front of you. It's round 1. You guys have to cross things out. You know, in the old days when they first started with reg agreements in this town, we literally read every single line, every single paragraph. David Lawler and Mr. Kenny can attest to that. It was a very long, boring night, okay? But we crossed out things. We said, go back and redo this, go back and redo that, this paragraph, this paragraph, this paragraph, whatever. So the planning board actually renegotiated with the applicant in public on television the regulatory agreement and how it worked. If that's too cumbersome and you think, oh my gosh, okay. So, and then we ended up with a different document than how we started. And that's the document that got voted or denied, but mostly voted by the planning board because it had been through the meat grinder already. And then it went to town council, and that's the document that they started with. They started with an already revised regulatory agreement, okay? At that time, sometimes there were joint meetings between the planning board and town council so that the applicant didn't have, town council didn't reject it and send it back, you know, go through their machinations and make sausage on their end and send it back to the planning board, so that there were joint hearings between planning board and town council. You can, rather than subcommittees, it has to be done in public. You can't renegotiate a regulatory agreement not in public. That's not the right thing to do. It just really is not the responsible thing to do. So if you want to speed the process up, which I don't know, that's a good idea on something like this, but if that's your choice and your obligation, you can have joint hearings with town council and you could go that way. That's an option. It's been done in the past. It's precedent. It's perfectly legal to do, and it's in the public. Anyway, that's just my comment on process that was brought up tonight, so I'm throwing that out on the table. Couple comments, just a little bit lighter than what I've talked about already. The black and white photo that Mr. Kenny started with in his presentation is not from the 1996 when the applicant bought this property, okay? It's probably from the early 60s, I would say. And that's long before the applicant owned the property. And we already know that the photo from the waterfront the architect showed is realistic, but the other photos are from about a mile away. Thank you, Wayne, for picking up that, that navigation from Lewis Bay. This project is on the hill. Cape Cod Hospital is not on a hill. It was said before that the hospital's on a hill. It's not. This project is. My biggest concern about the quote unquote community benefits of this project is that every single one of them is self-serving for the project and the applicant and the developer. There isn't one thing that's coming out of this other than the possibility of more affordable housing. Thank you, Mr. Twist, for that. I think I brought that up in my memo also. That is the only one. If the planning board decides that they're going to maintain all these waivers and they're going to let this project go through because they think it's beautiful, and hats off to the architect, it's a beautiful design. It just is in a very small area and it doesn't belong here. That's all. Nobody's saying it's an ugly building. It's beautiful. However, it is just too much for the area here. But there is no other community benefit. The benefit is to the developer. There's no recycling that I heard of. It's all about trash. Take your bag and throw it in the trash can, which we already heard wasn't sufficient enough. Where's the recycling go? I hope they're recycling. I also want to state that steamship passengers do not disembark on School Street. You know, that whole visual of people hauling their suitcases up that hill, that's not what happens. And as far as the petition that Mr. Riley has submitted, I'd love to hear the names and addresses on the petition. Are they all from Hyannis? Are they residents? I mean, who are they? I don't think it's right to read a whole petition and then not tell us the 14 people that signed it. Be curious to know. I hope you read my memo. I'm not going to repeat anything else that's on there because you've heard enough tonight on that. I just think that I'm one that said that really feels honestly that if the height restriction is 2.5, yes, there are reasons to modify it, but to more than double it, no. Nothing in the world on the waterfront, no. Density, no. Anyway, good luck in your modifications. I hope you do cross things out, renegotiate, get it where you like it. It's like a piece of silly putty, you know, reform it and go back to the clay thrower's wheel and come out with a new piece. Good luck.
Thank you, Felicia. That's great. Thank you. Moving along, going to go to Laura Cronin. Laura, if you have any, there you go.
Yep. Can you hear me?
We got you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having this public meeting tonight and allowing me to speak. Pretty much coming this far into the public comment, I actually get to say ditto a lot with, I echo a lot of the things that I've heard this evening with the sense of the density and the number of stories that are on the waterfront. And I think it's important that we recognize that this particular design is really very good looking building. And I even saw the floor layouts, the floor plans, and they are wonderful. They are just, magnificent compared to what was out there before. And the problem is that it's on our waterfront and it is 2.5 story zone. And from the street, I did see that they did scale that down a little bit, but from the waterfront and from that scale up 24, 26 feet, and now you really are up 8 stories. The comparatives with the hospital and the greenery building, the hospital is not required to follow the zoning. They are not under the same consideration obligations with the town's ordinances. And the greenery is back up off of the waterfront, and I believe that it went through a similar process with a similar review, but it is setting back off of the street. And the same with the town buildings. They are not part of the zoning rather. They are existing town properties and they don't follow the same type of development. You look at the different scales around it and you can see that this then becomes a massive structure as you're coming in to the harbor. The harbor is our most precious resource that we have in Hyannis, and being able to preserve that for historic as well as aesthetics is really important. I think most of the people that have spoken tonight have mentioned that you look at this as a development, and the 6 stories, 5.5 or 6 stories is for the benefit of the developer. There is no doubt that that's what do you call it, the financial liability to convert this for that purpose. Originally, when it was in original presentations, it was said that they needed the height in order to accommodate the garage and the elevator, and that the 6th story or the 6th window was not really usable space, but in fact it really is. And I'm glad that at least they're admitting that now, and that becomes the problem. I hope that we don't I hope we do not accept this project for the benefit of a developer when it really is setting a precedent for the harbor going forward. Think of if everyone else said, oh, this is the new scale. Yes, it's 2.5, but you've got now dockside condominiums now that are 8 feet from the sea level. Let's do that all the way around. And before you know it, you don't have a waterfront anymore. You just have condos and starting to look like not Cape Cod. If you go to Chatham, if you go to like the other towns that have the waterfront, this is not what they would accept. If you were off the waterfront, if you were back towards the street, Main Street, it absolutely would be best. I mean, this is where something like that really belongs, up off the waterfront. And one of the other things would be the density. Making sure that even the height is kind of where you're looking at it from the sea level, but the density, you're setting the precedent again for any other development on the waterfront. Public safety would be a concern in getting in and around there. It's very difficult to go back if you're taking a right-hand turn and inadvertently down the School Street or High School Road. That's kind of where a School Street where you're going to wind up going all the way down and back up. So there's already inadvertent traffic that goes up and down there just on a regular basis. So I hope that we would take a look at this more from a aesthetic and from what the Hyannis district is really about. It is waterfront, and it's protecting the historic nature and the aesthetics. If I had the opportunity to drive down Cape, off down towards Wellfleet in that area. I hadn't done that in quite some time, visiting some family down there. And it reminded me of, wow, this is some of those areas. It's just like going down to Old Cape Cod. It's very narrow roads. It's very low development. And that's what you want to see. That's what you want people coming to. You want people to be coming into Hyannis Harbor and looking at it as a welcoming area. And if those units could be down to 4 feet, even, I mean, 4 stories rather, or 3.5 stories, that I think would have a tremendous impact and support for the public, and for being able to not make a mistake setting the precedent here and say, whoops, how did this happen? I hope you do take the time to go over through this regulatory agreement and in the public, hopefully live. I appreciate Mr. Ojala having some health issues. I apologize, I feel bad for that, but it is a public comment, and this forum, at least to me personally, doesn't welcome a lot of feedback, or at least being able to see things and maybe exchange some conversation with people in the audience. So again, thank you for your time and consideration, and hope that you do not accept the waivers that are being requested in this regulatory agreement, the way it's stated. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Laura. Appreciate those comments. Just moving along, next on my screen is Marie LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the time. As I look at our particular situation, so I am president of the board of the Lewis Bay Condo Association, and representing that association as well as myself personally, I would like to address the parking issue, certainly because I know where all those visitors are going to park. They're going to park in our lot, as they do now when they can't find a spot, in one of the ferry parking lots. We tow heavily and regularly, especially on the weekends, all through the summer. So we are very, very concerned about the amount of visitor parking that would happen there. In terms of the precedent, I'd also like to make sure that the committee is aware that the Anchor Inn very recently changed hands from a long-term family ownership to a corporate ownership. And I know personally, having a relationship with the family, that the only reason they did not extend their particular building had to do with the regulations and had to do with the heights as well as the parking. So in terms of, letting the cat out of the bag and having there be another organization who might pursue this same particular type of floor plan layout density, it's very, very much on our minds as they sit right across from us there. And also in terms of the renters, I know that for us, we have bylaws that also make sure that folks can only rent twice a year. Interestingly enough, we ended up having 5 units purchased by one of the arms of Cape Cod Hospital, who bring in interns, and we have a regular rotation of almost 15 people every month. So it definitely, and we recently redid our bylaws to not allow that any longer. So we've had to take steps, but it's amazing what people will do with what seems like a perfectly reasonable regulation, and how it affects the entire feel of your basic community and the people who live here. And the other big issue that we find is, especially as I'm chairman of the board, is as folks have purchased units in our building, which are described always as luxury condominiums, and certainly not near the extent of what is being proposed here. The amount of Section 8 housing and crime all around us comes up as sometimes they run crime reports and other types of public documents. And so I somehow think that looking at putting a building up like this, besides all the density and, how many people and all of that, and the safety and all of that, Um, it's a great wish, but I'm not sure that it's just not a step too far, in the sense that all of the other neighbors don't go away, the situations don't go away. I realize we're trying to move to a position, but this seems like it's a pretty far stretch. Our regular, purchase here is in the neighborhood of $500,000 on the top end and 375 or so on the bottom end. And the idea that that's going to quadruple for somebody to be literally catty corner to us, even with the given amenities, seems like a big stretch. So those are our concerns. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Marie. Appreciate those comments. And I see one more person dialing on a phone number. It's a 617 number.
Yes, hello, Mr. Chairman. This is Marty Riley calling.
Hi, Marty. Yes, do you have any public comment to add?
Yes, I do, and I thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for giving me an opportunity to say a few words. I was at another hearing earlier this evening on the Cape and couldn't participate during the initial presentation of the developer, Mr. Bornstein, John Kenny, and their team. And I just wanted to say that over the years, I've represented a number of different clients here on Hyannis Harbor. I'm a former senator here in the Commonwealth, but among them Highline Cruises, the Newport Hotel Group, David Colombo, Wayne Kirker, Ted Zambellis, Sam Baxter, and others. And I've spent a lot of time assisting Mr. Bornstein on this project as he begins to move forward with his plan. And I think that this project can be a very positive, transformative one for Hyannis Harbor, for the village of Hyannis and the town of Barnstable, as the capital of the Cape, as the economic and financial center of the Cape, as the cultural center, transportation center, and the gateway to the islands. And I think it's, as I meet more and more of the people who live in the immediate vicinity on the harbor, from Ocean Street all the way over to Wayne Kirker's Marina, it's been extremely enlightening to me to spend some time with them and to learn about their great concerns about the tremendous amount of crime in the area, the homelessness in the area. In fact, there's been over on the dockside property, they've found over the past few years a couple of dead bodies. So I think it's a travesty that property continues to sit there and has not been developed since 1997. And just for the record, I know the comment was made that it wasn't owned by Mr. Bornstein at that time, but it absolutely was. And the article that was referenced by Attorney John Kenny, written in the Cape Cod Times by the editorial board back on March 25th, I think it was, of 1997, entitled "A Great Harbor Project for Hyannis, Don't Let It Get Away," was actually printed at that time with the signatures of numerous people, I think including Wayne Kirker might have been a member and a signator on that advertisement and the editorial that was accompanying it in the Cape Cod Times. But I think there's many positive benefits to be derived from the project. First and foremost, it will enhance lighting and security in the neighborhood, which should contribute to a reduction in crime, in addition to creating the 34 high-end residential units, which are going to generate about $700,000 in needed tax revenues for the town. There's also going to be, as has been referenced, an affordable housing component for the project, which will also address the tremendous need for workforce housing and affordable housing on the Cape. So I, this evening, just want to respectfully urge the members of the planning board, as they continue to go forward and consider this project, and also as they do it in consultation with the members of the council, that something positive has to be done with this property and with this site to transform Hyannis in a positive way over the next 10 years. And I think there's a way to achieve some kind of a compromise and a consensus, working with all the parties who have expressed their sentiment tonight, to make something a reality that will be far greater than that vacant lot, which has resulted, as we have said, in homelessness and crime and dead bodies being found on the site. So, I thank the members of the planning board and members of the community who've expressed some sentiment here tonight. And I hope that we can make something there that's very positive ultimately for the town and benefit not only the town of Barnstable, but all the businesses that are nearby, the restaurants, neighboring marinas, contribute to the downtown revitalization and make it a positive experience for everybody that comes to Hyannis as the capital of the Cape and the gateway of the islands. So I thank you, and I look forward to being part of those discussions as part of the Stuart Bornstein team, and as we try to arrive at some kind of consensus that makes it positive for the future of Hyannis Harbor and the village and the town of Barnstable for posterity. And I thank you.
Great, Marty. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. And
thank you,
Molly. Yes, Molly. Do you have any public comment? See, Molly. Molly, do you want to unmute and offer any comment at this time? Okay, I think I have everyone. Is there anybody else on that would like to make public comment that has not done so already? Okay. All right, I think we're all set. So, obviously there's been a ton of public comment on this, a lot of correspondence received. Really appreciate everyone's comments, great to listen to. And, again, this is a significant and impactful proposal. And to this end, I personally would recommend the establishment of a subcommittee with joint participation. Section 168(5)(b) of the Town of Barnstable General Ordinance offers this planning board the option to establish a subcommittee to discuss elements of regulatory agreement application, obviously between authorized parties and a qualified applicant. I believe a subcommittee would allow us to work through a lot of the details that we've talked about tonight and concerns, after which it could be placed back on our agenda and continue our discussions and process as usual. I propose that the subcommittee meetings would be held via Zoom and open for public viewing for full transparency. And Jim, do you mind, just providing a quick overview of this process? It's new to me and new to, I think, this board. So maybe you could just speak to the process and how it might be beneficial for this specific application.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think you actually described it rather well. The opportunity here is described in 168(5), where the planning board as the lead negotiator may include joint participation from other municipal boards, departments, and commissions that can assist in the negotiation process. And I think you described it well in that this board historically has been as transparent as can be. And I think any subcommittee that is formed will continue to do so. We can certainly offer, depending on the makeup of the board, public session either via Zoom or in person, however a subcommittee may wish. And from what I've heard, is a group consisting of a few members or a couple members of the planning board, perhaps a couple members of town council, as they are the secondary review group. And since there is a lot of discussion about housing, perhaps one member from the housing committee. And so this process, again, could work, again, in public session, where the subcommittee can work with the applicant to review some of the very vital details that have been brought up by this board and the public, and bring back for the full board's consideration, perhaps some refined details about those concerns.
All right, it's muted. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. And obviously, sufficient notice could be given in relation to these meetings, and meetings could be held via Zoom and recorded, which I think would be great. So Before I make a motion, first, I just wanted to turn to Attorney Kenny. Attorney Kenny, do you have anything you'd like to state at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of public comments. I'd like to have an opportunity to digest it, maybe work with the committee, the subcommittee that you seem to about ready to send us off to. A few things I want to check on. One thing I want to clarify, that initial photo that I showed, I never, I'm going to have to double check the tape, but I don't believe I ever indicated that that was the condition of the property in 1996. I said it was developed that way. When my client bought it in 96, it was not developed that way, because I checked the aerial photos today of from 1995 and the buildings were down. So I don't believe I ever represented that. So I, as Ms. Penn indicated, so I don't feel that I misrepresented anything. And as far as access to the waterfront, we don't have access to the waterfront. Mr. Kirk owns and controls all of that. So we're not blocking access to the waterfront, as somebody stated. Somebody suggested we're blocking the view, but if you ride down South Street, there aren't many views of the harbor from South Street. So other than that, there's a lot to digest. I'd like to have an opportunity to kind of go back through my notes and then work with the subcommittee and then come back to the planning board. So thank you.
Great, Attorney Kenny. Appreciate your time this evening, presentation, and those clarifications. Before I make a motion related to the subcommittee, do we have any board discussion prior to me making that motion? And if anyone has any comments they'd like to make, if you just raise your hand. Okay, I'd like to make a motion. I move to form a subcommittee in accordance with Section 168(5)(b) of the Town of Barnstable General Ordinance. Negotiation of the elements of a regulatory agreement between authorized parties and a qualified applicant, which shall be led by a planning board and shall include representatives from other municipal boards, departments, and commissions, where joint participation will assist the negotiation process. I require that said subcommittee be comprised of members of the planning board, members of town council, and a member of the housing committee. Those members may be amended by the planning board representatives of the subcommittee as they see fit. Said subcommittee shall adhere to open meeting law and will be held via Zoom and open for public viewing. And do I have a second on this motion?
Second that.
Thank you, Steve. And all those in favor, starting with Bob.
Aye.
And Michael.
Aye.
And Steve.
Aye.
And Ray.
Aye.
And Tim.
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Great. Attorney Kenny, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we need a motion to continue to a date certain. Of
Okay,
the full board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd offer that motion.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, to that date certain, may I offer September 26th?
Attorney Kenny, what are your thoughts on September 26th?
That would be fine, Mr. Chairman.
Great. And Ray, do you mind just restating that motion with that date?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair. I move that we continue RA 2022. I read the right number. RA 2022-002 Dockside Residence, 110 School Street and 115 School Street, that would be continued to September 26th, 2022 at 7 p.m.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ray. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Attorney Kenny, yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to check with Mr. Bornstein. I just checked my calendar, and that is Rosh Hashanah.
Right.
I believe that's a high holiday. Stuart, Stuart, was that okay with you? Or are you muted, Stuart? You got to go off mute.
Mute. There you go. That date's okay. But if we're going to have a meeting, should we have a sub-meeting to discuss things for that meeting in between that date? I mean, there's things we should go over with another meeting in between. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're going to discuss next steps related to the subcommittee, after the completion of this meeting, at which point we'll have some plan for subcommittee meetings. I think the point of, yeah.
I'm sorry. In other words, the subcommittees will be before the 26th to discuss what we're going to discuss for the meeting for the 26th.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that was the purpose of putting the meeting out to the 26th of September, to give us some time for the subcommittee to meet and have those discussions.
That's fine.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and that was Bob that seconded. And all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
And Michael?
Aye.
Okay, and Steve?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Okay, the item is continued. Thank you, Attorney Kenny and Mr. Bornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we going to set, when can we expect to set committee meetings?
We are going to touch base with that coming up, and I don't have any, concrete information yet. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so with the motion for the planning board members, we will send a recommendation to town council for requests for participation in that subcommittee. And then at that time, we will certainly notify the applicant. And obviously for all public meetings, we will certainly publicize that, post it online, and any other areas that are open for the public, so that we can, meaning town halls and the like, so that we can get the word out.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Moving along, Kate, if we could have an update on the LCP.
Thank you, Chair. Kate Maldonado, Assistant Director of Planning and Development. At this time, I'd like to give a quick update to members of the Planning Board as well as the public attending this meeting. Our next local comprehensive planning meeting will be held on Thursday, August 25th at 6 p.m. and that will be in person at Town Hall in the hearing room. To give you a heads up of what will be discussed at that meeting, our focus will be related to process as well as strategies associated with community outreach and engagement. So we look forward to that next meeting, and thank you for the opportunity to provide this update.
Great, Kate. Thank you. Thank you for your work on that. And next up, we need a motion to approve minutes for July 25th, 2022.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Tim. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ray. And all those in favor, starting with Bob?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Minutes are approved. Future meetings, August 22nd and September 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Any final board or staff comments before we adjourn? Okay, look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a
So
motion
moved.
to adjourn.
All right, we'll give that one to Bob and a second.
Second.
Thank you, Steve. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.